Colin is also the founder and president of Healthcare Centre Steps, as well as treasurer and co-chair of the Business Advisory Committee in the Kamloops Chamber of Commerce. He's been a strong advocate for changing federal tax law to incentivize the donation of land for affordable housing, and that's what you'll hear about today. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you. Actually, I think I've already got one.
You got one.
Is this working?
Incredible.
Can you guys hear this? A whole other level. Yeah. All right, there we go. So yeah, I really appreciate everybody being in here, especially because I did actually recently do a webinar. So I really, through the Canadian Network of Community Land Trusts, I wondered how many people were going to actually show up for this. And some of you have seen before, I know, through the years, and I have been doing this for years, but I was just saying this is really, it's really encouraging for me here. A lot of the struggles that people are talking about are things I think really do relate to this policy, and I really do feel like it is something that could dramatically change the landscape for community land trusts. And the other thing I point out as well is that we were just talking about this earlier, but I don't think that there's actually any other presenters talking about policy here. So policy is extremely powerful. We could change the laws in this country to give you guys whole new levers to do the things that you're doing. So that, I'm a policy nerd, self-proclaimed policy nerd. I've had success with policy, provincially and nationally, and it's super powerful and empowering to be able to know that we can, as people, impact the laws in our country. So that's really, it is what I'm going to talk to you about. So, I don't know where I'm supposed to point this. There we go, it's working. Who am I? So that's a quick background, so thank you for being here, and that's a quick background on the idea of this being policy, but I always like to start off with a little bit of background of who I am, because you go and you hear these people talk everywhere, and a lot of times people don't actually go into the background of who they are and where they're coming from, and I think that really kind of helps for people to understand the bigger story and like what the message they're delivering. So, as mentioned, by the way, I completely forgot that we gave you guys a bio. So when you were reading that, I was like, oh God, what's it even going to say? But yeah, that's right. I'm doing all of this work as a volunteer. I have a company I run, a consulting company actually, and I work with I actually help a lot of different ministries to actually engage with a lot of different First Nations on really complex projects. They're always community driven. It's very rewarding work, I love it, but about 30% of what I do or more in any week is actually volunteer work. I do a pile of volunteering, and I really want to give back to the community. So where this policy came through is actually the Chambers of Commerce are actually amazing vehicles for creating policy and actually pushing it through government. A lot of people don't realize that. It's kind of the hidden talent of Chambers. This is the other thing I like to throw out there really early, is I'm not asking for any money. This is not a trick. So like my biggest pushback, I think, through the years working on this is that it almost seems too good to be true. Like I'll come in there and I'll talk to people and they'll be like, okay, and there is no downside and there is no catch and you don't make any money off of this. Why are you even doing this? Why have you been volunteering for 6 years pushing this? And I've self-funded everything that I've actually done on this front. And I'm doing it because really the same reason all of you are here in this room, I think, is that you guys want to see change. Like that is it. And I can tell you there actually is no catch. Like it is almost too good to be true, this thing, and I think that's honestly been a bit of an uphill battle I've had. It's been kind of funny. And that's it. Like the one thing I'm asking for is hear this story, hear about this policy. I've got some materials here, and I'm happy to share it with anybody that's interested, but we have a really unique window right now where we have a federal election coming up, and we have an opportunity to possibly sway the government into implementing this policy. So if all of you like this, and you really should, you will be the benefactors of this entirely. I need your help, really, is really what I'm saying, is that the more of us that come together and actually support this and push it forward, the more likely we are going to get government's attention and we are going to get this legislated. And yeah, some of you might have seen me. I've done a few, through the years, I've done a few webinars actually through the network, the Canadian Network, which has been amazing. Such a great opportunity. So if you've seen this before, this is going to be an update for you on some of the things that have happened there. And again, I think it's even more pertinent now more than ever. We just had a conversation actually like earlier about how I was just in a presentation, and they're talking about 40 years. Like a fellow, I think his name was Tom, was talking about 40 years of running a community land trust. What are the lessons he can really pass on and teach people? And the number one thing he kept on saying is own the land. If you can own the land, that's the number one thing to do. And then he's got a lot of leases right now. And the Kamloops Community Land Trust, we have a lease actually of property from the city, which is an interesting kind of scenario. And he basically was saying if there's anything you can do to not have a lease and actually own land, it's the best. But the problem is that if it's government land and they're trying to give it to a community land trust, the problem is that there's actually legislative requirements where it goes through a pecking order. Basically, First Nations, then other federal agencies, then other provincial agencies, and so on and so forth, kind of get first stab at it before it could come to like community land trust. So what happens is a lot of times those land, when they come available, they don't make it to a land trust. They get picked up long before that. So what this policy is actually doing, and this is where this is extremely powerful, is it's actually going to incentivize private donation of land. So if you look at in Canada, and this is actually, I should talk about like some of the background here, some additional background, where this policy is actually coming from, and so my kind of connection to this as well is that my dad actually created the Calgary Community Land Trust. He was on the task force in Alberta to end homelessness. You know, apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. He was a successful commercial lawyer, but he did piles of volunteer work. And I always kind of give him a hard time. I'm like, you know what, you're just way too ahead of your time, because they're trying to do this in the 90s before housing was like it is now. And what they did is they founded this board. They founded a number of other really awesome things, but they looked around the world, what's a model we can replicate in Canada? And what they did is when they looked around the world, they found this community land trust model. It existed for a long time. There's some amazing community land trusts in the US. There's some amazing ones in Europe. Actually, they're everywhere. And he was like, why are we not doing this in Canada? So they created the Calgary Community Land Trust. And what happened is very shortly after doing that, they realized a tax problem in Canada. And that is actually what my policy is looking to fix, is the tax problem. And the difference is, what happens is that in these other countries, there's an incentive basically for private people to make donations of land. And I'm going to get into the reasons of why that doesn't happen in Canada and why we need to really fix that, and how I think in a very responsible way we can fix this. So, yeah, they want to mimic a proven model from around the world. CLT is an innovative approach. I don't have to tell you guys this. It's amazing. It holds land for the community benefit in perpetuity forever. So the benefits accrue to subsequent generations. It's incredible. We really are going through a renaissance. I was actually just grabbing a coffee with somebody, and we were talking about how community land trusts have been around for a long time, and I'm sure you've all seen this. There's been this real amazing like rediscovery of like, this is a hidden gem we always had and we kind of forgot about. And right now, when we need affordable housing, people are starting to rediscover the benefits of a community land trust and what it is. But yeah, so the tax problem is really the problem. And I'm going to get into that in a second, but first of all, to set this up a little bit, land is really the key to affordable housing, and all of you know that if you're involved with the community land trusts. And there's lots of stats to back this up. So some recent stats that are pulled together, for example, from CMHC in 2018, this sort of stuff actually blew my mind when I looked at these numbers. Anywhere from 30 to 75% of the total sale price of a dwelling, and a major contributing factor to the housing supply and pricing is actually land. It's shocking how much of it, and so that's, again, amazing how community land trusts really take land out of the equation is what they do, right? Here's the other like shocking, I was just updating some of my stats, and like this stuff just still blows my mind. So as of April 2024, the median house price in Canada is $795,000, and the average rent of a one-bedroom, one-bathroom apartment is over $2,200. That's across Canada, so that's, I mean, huge differences in different places, but that is so unattainable, it's ridiculous for most people. Like, we have a major problem, and we are gonna have to tackle this in a totally new and innovative way, or I don't know what our future is gonna look like. Here is another like huge secret sauce of a community land trust, and it's funny is I don't hear a lot of people talking about this, but this is something all of you should talk about when you're going out there and you're trying to impress people about the power of a community land trust, is that when I hear the government right now talking about housing as being an issue, it's always supply, 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 and what they're saying when they're saying supply, supply, supply is they're saying build more, build more, build more. But here's the thing, there's a huge incentive right now for developers, and what's been happening for a long time, for them to buy up the affordable, the lower like income kind of properties, demolish the stuff, and actually redevelop it and build higher density, higher value homes on top of that. So we are actually rapidly eroding our affordable housing supply at the whole time. And the government just doesn't seem to really look at that at all. They're like, we just need to build more homes. That's the only answer. So community land trust, where it's absolutely incredible, is all of you, because, well, I guess now I am a community land trust. I got roped into it too after a few years, but all of us, I guess, we have this amazing power because we plug the leaks. We stop the erosion of the affordable housing supply. And that is half the battle. It's not just putting water into the bucket constantly, it's plugging the holes is the other side of the equation, and we got to start looking at that. So that is the amazingness of a community land trust and why we need to do more of it. Here's another stat that actually blew my mind. 30% of new houses are being bought by investors. This is like 2024 data. That was mind-blowing to me. I thought it was like 5% or 6%. Like, that is insane. And so, you know, it really feeds that whole the rich get richer sort of thing, and we're getting this massive divide that is surfacing, and that's a way bigger problem than I ever knew about, I'll tell you honestly. Federal government, they're starting to take, and even our provincial government, starting to take a pass now, or are looking at options of actually mobilizing public land and trying to figure out if they can use that for affordable housing. Our policy kind of looks at doing the same thing, but actually from the private side. And there's some advantages, like huge advantages of doing it from the private side. But I'll get into that more. And really, what I kind of keep talking about is basically saying maybe community land trusts have a really huge role to play with this. And I've actually got some connections up to Ravi Callan and EB, and I've been through my day job. And I've been, as soon as I made that announcement, I was on the horn of them instantly and said, and classic politicians to make these announcements before they figured out the details. And I'm like, this could be, a community land trust could be a great vehicle or mechanism for you guys to actually make this happen. Have you thought about that? So they're milling that stuff over right now. We'll see. And so the big takeaway from all this is that although the housing affordability dynamics in Canada are complex, data shows the key to finding a solution to the affordable housing crisis is intrinsically linked to the availability and the price of land, which is why community land trusts are the solution. And what we've been doing to date really hasn't been making a difference. So community land trusts, I'm not going to get into this because you all know this. I do this presentation to a bunch of different groups that are out there, so normally what I would do is I'd go through this great big bit where I'd be like, do you know what a community land trust is? This is what a community land trust can do. These are all the amazing advantages of it. But you guys already know all that stuff, so I'm not gonna go into it. Plus you probably heard it in other presentations all day, and it's the end of the day as well. So, like I just said, community land trusts, they're amazing because we're creating a community asset that's publicly owned, and it's going to be kept in the public good forever. That is our power. So the issue, you know, the big buildup, what is this big issue? Why are community land trusts in Canada not the size of like community land trusts in Europe or community land trusts in the US? I don't know if you've ever asked yourselves those questions. Like, I've talked to land trusts that are operating like 20,000 units, like in like, or more. Like, why do we not have land trusts that size in Canada? We kind of are getting there now. And this is the reason why, this issue. The biggest problem is land donations. So right now, most community land trusts in Canada haven't yet accumulated enough income to be able to purchase their own land. So what happens is you're all subject to basically acts of philanthropy. That's what you need to kind of have happen. And so you're kind of handcuffed on this front. And so it's either going to be private donations or public donations. And if you look around at all the projects that are happening right now in Canada and BC, what you might notice is almost all of the land that's been donated, or these mechanisms, are almost always coming from government or a government entity. And have you ever asked yourself why? And if you haven't, I can tell you what the answer is. The answer is because they don't have to pay tax. Tax is the problem. This is not happening in Canada. So if we look at this, we also have a situation where there's actually many private landowners and actually corporations who are sitting on parcels of land that are unused. And they've been sitting on them for a really long time. And so I'm going to give you a tax example. I'm going to explain this. So I talked to Domtar Canada, for example, who love this policy. I've talked to actually corporations across Canada who love this policy. They accumulated some land. They're an old entity. They've got some random chunks of land they got in like 1920 for like $100, right? And it's been sitting on their books, not really using it. And now what's happening is it's gone from worth $100 to worth $2 million. So now on their balance sheet, they have a $2 million asset. They're not using it at all. And they could sell it and free up $2 million, I get that. But if they do that, they're gonna crystallize a massive capital gains tax. And it's gonna actually impact their balance sheet, and it's gonna look bad. And then their investors and their shareholders are all gonna get angry at them. So what do? They just keep it on the books, unused. It's easier and safer just to keep it there and keep doing what they're doing. So we have all these chunks of land that are like sitting there unused, that the corporations would be happy to put them to good use, but they need an out, effectively, to be able to do that. They need a way to do it in a way that they're not taking a huge hit. The other thing that you get as well is you get these, in a lot of communities, you get effectively what I kind of call land barons. So you probably all have this where you have like a family or multiple families that own a pile of land in your community. And so in Kamloops, it's kind of funny, I'm friends with a few of them, but you look around town and we've got like the Ken Lepin wing of the hospital. We got the Ken Lepin University Theater. We got the Ken Lepin whatever. Ken just, in his own words, he's kind of funny, but he's like, I just really love playing Monopoly so badly that I just played Monopoly my whole life. And now like he's worth, $100 million. The reason he's donated all this money to the hospital and to the university and all this stuff is not because he's just a super nice guy, although he is, and he is trying to do good stuff. It's because his accountant is sitting there and saying, you're at the end of your life, Ken, you need to start to dispose of some assets. We got to do it in a way that you're not paying astronomical amounts of tax. So he's doing this for actually the tax incentive is a big part of it, right? And what happens is if he just donated land, this is one of the things I'm going to build into, if he just donated land to a community land trust, or if Domtar just donated land to your community land trust right now, what would happen is they would give up that land. So let's say it's a $2 million parcel of land, let's call it. They're gonna give up $2 million. Then, on top of that, they are actually gonna owe the government a pile of tax. So they're sitting there and they're like, this is insane. And I've talked to, again, places across Canada where they're like, individuals are trying right now to do some good stuff in their community. They're trying to literally look at giving assets to community land trusts, and the tax angles of it is absolutely killing them. Like, they just can't justify doing that, and so they're not there. And so what happens is that it's just a huge disincentive in Canada, and by the way, this is different in those other countries I talked about earlier. In Canada, there's a huge tax disincentive for individuals and corporations to give all of you land parcels, and that is a problem. Not only that, Chrystia Freeland just announced we got 66% capital gains tax, so that just went up, and that's going to exacerbate this problem even more, and it actually makes this policy even more powerful, ultimately. So what is the policy? What does this actually look like? So again, I've already kind of covered this. The solution. When I've been successful with policy, when I'm successful, one of the key things I do is government doesn't like to take risks, right? They're super risk averse. So the best policies you can come up with is if you can find a precedent, if you can find something they're already doing and they're already can stomach, and then you just tweak it a little bit. That's something where they can be like, okay, I can do this. I can wrap my head around this, right? So what I did is I went out there and I looked, and we have something in Canada, it's called the Ecological Gift Program. It's been in existence since 2006, okay, so it's operated for a long time. And right now in Canada, if you make a donation as an individual or corporation to an ecological land trust of ecological land, that donation is capital gains exempt in addition to being able to get a tax credit back. And why did the government do this? Literally their own words back then was to create a powerful incentive, a powerful set of tools to incentivize the donation of land for public benefit. That is what we need right now. And so from this point forward, and this you can Google the Ecological Gift Program right now, you can check it out. And it's been running, and the other beauty of this thing is it's been running since 2006, so they've actually built into it very robust anti-avoidance, anti-tax rules. So the one thing where people get a little worried about this is they think, oh, some evil developer is going to come in and like make a bunch of money off this or find a tax loophole. The beauty of doing this is that it is super airtight. It's had 20 years of basically closing the gaps. And so this right off the hop is going to be watertight, this mechanism. And you can ask yourself, like, has this incentive, did it work? Well, I was able to find one reference in 2015, so that's from 2006, 2015, in 9 years, over $1 billion worth of land has been donated using this mechanism in Canada. That represents over 248,000 hectares of land. So does it work? Does it make a difference for corporations? Will they actually do it? I would say, heck yeah. Can you imagine getting $1 billion worth of land donated across Canada for affordable housing right now? Can you imagine the difference that would make? And you go back to what Tom was saying in that earlier presentation where like, it's really hard to get land, but if you can own it, it is a game changer. That is the success of a land trust. This is you owning it. You're not getting leased this. You are given it. You own it, your asset, it's a community asset. That is super powerful, and that is what is not happening right now. So, what is the solution? So my tax policy is pretty simple. What it's saying is, let's mirror what's already in place for the Ecological Gift Program, but let's just change it slightly, and let's say that if a corporation or an individual donates land specifically to a community land trust for affordable housing, that land is also capital gains exempt and you can get a tax credit. So it's very targeted. There's lots of mechanisms I've built in. I've run through this policy for years, run it through tax lawyers. We built in like recapture tax penalties, all sorts of stuff. It cannot be used. Arm's length clauses. I love a community land trust model because it's a community board of directors. It's independent oversight. There are like legislative mechanisms in place with these structures. So it is a sound way of doing this. So here's the big tax example I like to give because again, people are always like, it's too good to be true. And like I said, the other thing that people say, oh, and I should also, before I get into this, the other amazing thing about this is it actually costs taxpayers nothing. Like all the projects we're getting that are happening right now which are making almost no real difference if you go out there. If you look at these large like taxpayer funded projects, it's like a $100 million project. They've been doing this stuff for years and years, right? Piles and piles of taxpayer money. Has it actually made a difference to any of you in your communities for affordable housing? Because it's only gone up where I live. It's not scaled enough. Like you can't do it because there's only so much tax money out there. The government gets flack for using it. This thing is actually mobilizing private wealth for public good. It's not, we don't need tax money from the government to do this. We could literally overnight, I'm telling you, if this was legislated, I bet you there could be 100 projects across Canada overnight like that. And you want to talk about scaling something and making an actual difference? Like they're sitting there ready to go, and we don't need to go get authorization from Treasury for a whack load of money over and over and over again. It's instantaneously can happen. And I know people that would do a transaction on the spot if this is in place. So what's the tax example look like? I want to put this up here because, again, the part of like the worry sometimes people get is they think that these evil developers or evil corporations that own the land are going to somehow benefit from this. And I want to be able to show you that they definitely do not. The best benefit for them, honestly, if they're going to do it, is to sell the property. So this first example, it's very simplified, but it looks at, and some of these are real numbers actually, if it looks at Victoria, BC, so I picked something in Victoria, I found a lot that you could have bought in 1990 for $215,000, and it's now worth $1.4 million. That's insane, but yeah, that's the world we live in. And also the other insane thing is that 1990 was like 35 years ago. This makes me feel very old. But anyways, so right now, if they were not holding these things on the books just because they didn't want to crystallize the capital gains, like the best thing they could do is sell it. And so, one pushback I get from government is they say like, well, we're gonna lose out on all that capital gains tax. And so my pushback to them is this. I'm like, no. If they were gonna sell it, they'd sell it like that, because then we're gonna make the most money that way. So you're not gonna lose out on any of that money, you're still getting it. it's the properties they don't want to sell that they're sitting on over and over and over and over again, and you're never getting that tax either because that's been sitting there forever. So you're actually not missing out on capital gains tax. So that's the first scenario. So by far, they'll make the most money doing this, right? Right now, if they made a donation of this land, the same parcel of land, to Community Land Trust, they would actually, in the end of it, they lose the $1.4 million asset off their books because they're giving it away to you, and they owe tax. And even if you were a charity, this includes if you were a charity and if you were able to issue them a charitable tax credit, guess what? The charitable tax credit doesn't even fully cover the tax owing. So that charitable tax credit goes to nothingness immediately, and they still owe the government tax right now. So you can see, those are their two options. If they're gonna sell it, they can make $1 million. They give it to you, they're in the hole more than the value of the bloody property. So, and if you look at consolidated financials, I can tell you this is part of my world, that looks really, really, really bad. Like this would be, you would get angry shareholders, you get angry managers, that's why this doesn't happen. So what does it look like if this policy was legislated into law? If we all got out there, we rallied the government, we made this happen? This is what it would look like. And this is the point where I want to say to you that if you look at it, it's still a negative number for the corporation on the bottom. So when people get worried that like, you know, these people making the donation are getting this tax credit and they don't have to pay capital gains tax, like they're net ahead, don't forget, they're still giving up like a $1.5 million property. What we're doing is we're lightening the blow to them. So they're not going to benefit. This is not where private corporations hugely benefit. The benefit, honestly, the person who benefits the most are the community land trusts, and then the communities, and then the people that are going to get the houses. Those are the people that get the benefit. We're lightening the damage to the people to do these donations so that they can justify it. And so if you go from, you know, looking at like a minus 1.5 million to a minus like 980,000, that's a heck of a lot better. It's almost half. It's getting up there. And they get, you know, that good public PR, or they get to solve some problems in their community. Like how many corporations and individuals are sitting there right now and being like, this is like, look what's happening out there. We have a major problem with like people struggling with housing. They get that positive impact, and that combined with that makes a transaction doable for them. So this just kind of flows through it. The other things that highlight as well right now is that land sale, there's zero benefit to a land trust if they do the sale. If you guys actually look at this transaction, you can actually see that the benefit is the largest when you actually are getting into something like this policy. And the net tax position is the best for the donor with the policy as well. So I'm going to flip through these slides really quick, but what I want to kind of say to you guys is that I actually nearly lost my mind and read the entire Income Tax Act. That was like 3,000 pages of a patchwork quilt of nightmare, let me tell you. And but what I did that is because I want to make it as easy as possible for government. And so I've actually gone through and covered all of the proposed changes that would need to be made to the Income Tax Act. So these are just me kind of flying through these things fairly quickly. But they're there, and it's actually been reviewed by tax lawyers across Canada, 2 like national tax lawyers, which are like, this is phenomenal. Obviously Canada needs their own independent legal advice, but we want to try to like lighten the workload, make it as easy as possible for them to do this. And we have an election coming up. Like this is the other thing. I'll say as a side note, I met the guy who created the Ecological Gift Program and was asking for tips. I met lots of amazing people on this journey actually, but he basically was just like, this is a way better idea than I ever came up with the Ecological Gift Program. It's like, this is such a problem, this is unbelievable. He's like, this should be a speech from the throne. And like, I would love that as like launching it. The other interesting avenue I'm exploring is because it's not actually asking for any money from the government, it can actually be a policy brought through the Senate. So I'm talking to some senators right now as well. I'm really trying to fire on all cylinders with this. But this is something we've never been able to access in Canada before. None of you have, and other community land trusts around the world have been able to do this. This will be the game changer for you. Now we are going to be finally unlocking not just government land that's probably going to be given to you as a lease, not ownership. This is going to be you building huge amounts of community assets to manage which is going to skyrocket, launch what you can do with your community land trust. Instead of being years and years and years of struggling and scraping, you're going to be able to do stuff right away. So where are we at right now? So through the years, this is kind of like a quick summary, because some of you might have seen me before, and maybe it's good to have an update. Actually, I know some of you have seen me before, and some of you have helped me before, actually, which is amazing, and I'm always appreciative of that. So we've already made all the proposed changes to the Income Tax Act. I just talked about that. We have the support of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, so I created the policy, I had to defend it locally, I had to defend it at a provincial floor, I flew to Ottawa and I tabled it on the floor for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and to present it and defend it on the floor. It passed with resounding support. So it's on the books of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, which represents over 200,000 businesses across Canada. They see the value in this. I actually just recently renewed it early in Calgary. I flew myself to Calgary to renew it, and it was pretty cool. At the conference, I got up there and I represented it again to see if there's still interest in this stuff, and we got 99.6% support, and they've never had that number before ever. And so this is a need. We all see this need, and we all see when you get into this, you can start to realize there really is no downside to it. The other thing is I continue to do presentations everywhere because you know what, this stuff's a battle. To do powerful and meaningful and good stuff, it's the long haul. You're all the warriors that are doing this stuff, right? We're all like this. So you got to not give up and hang in there and keep going. And I have been doing this for a long time. And I'm starting to see some pretty cool changes. The policy it's been reviewed by the Library of Parliament 3 times. They've actually, every time they've reinforced what we have been saying in our policy, so it gives it some more success. The policy actually made its way verbatim into a party platform. It was actually the Conservative Party platform, and I will tell you that I don't want this policy to be attached to any political party. Every political party, I want to have this policy because the one kind of sad thing, the Conservatives lost their minds over this. I can tell you the shadow housing minister, literally was just this is the most novel idea I've ever seen. And was just, but you know what? I think it actually negatively impacted us because we had a liberal government and I think they viewed it as a conservative policy. And I'm this is not, I don't want to, this is an everybody policy is what this is. So I would love to get it in every party platform. The Conservatives actually have told me that they've committed to putting it in again, but we need to get it in other party platforms too. So if any of you have any connections or ability to help on that, I would really appreciate it. I've met with the federal housing minister, previous federal housing minister, the shadow finance minister, various other MPs. Again, on my own dime, I've flown myself to Ottawa multiple times. I've created materials and packages. I've created videos anybody can access. The packages and information are actually in English and French. You got to do this stuff to kind of get attention of the decision makers. So I've done that. Yeah, you can promotional videos, other things to help explain it. If anybody has questions, here's some examples of them. It's an example of the video. I created a national petition to the Parliament of Canada, and we actually exceeded the threshold for petition signatures, and the policy was tabled on the floor of the House of Commons. I got a video of that, which is really cool. And it prompted the government had to respond to us. And one of my biggest problems is, even though I met with the federal housing minister and his policy committee loved it as well. One of the guys in the policy committee actually grew up around a community land trust. He's I love these things. This is awesome. But unfortunately, the housing minister correctly pointed out, my policy is actually not a housing policy. It's actually a tax policy. So he's you need to track down Chrystia Freeland, who is probably the busiest human in all of Canada. And besides being the deputy prime minister, she is also the minister of finance. So the beauty of the petition is Chrystia Freeland had to respond to me. So I actually got a response from Chrystia Freeland not too long ago. And her response was good, but it's the classic watered down government response. And one thing, I've actually built a rebuttal I'm going to send into her because she made this statement. The first statement was, well, donations of real estate are not currently eligible for exemption from capital gains. They are generally eligible for the CDTC, which will more than offset the tax payable on such donations. Not true. I actually have shown her in multiple calculations, you can't paint that brushstroke. And she's missing the point. The point here is not just to offset the tax owing, it was to create a powerful incentive to make people do this. The other thing too is, yeah, she kind of ended up with like a little bit better than a lukewarm response, which is like better than what you can get from most of the time from governments, especially people at this level, which is basically that like we need policies right now to look into this. And we are actually going to start to like look into this and dive into it, which is good. So I'm trying to leverage that as much as possible. We've got the British Columbia Law Institute is actually currently undertaking a study to review policies relatable to affordable housing. They really like this. They're digging into it. Nat just told me actually that I think the Canadian Network of Community Land Trusts might be like exploring a bit more policy work, and she might be interested in talking. You guys have always been supporters, and I'm very appreciative of that, but this sort of stuff is what we need to just get it in front of the decision makers. I think that has literally been the hookup. The Aboriginal Standing Committee on Housing and Homelessness in Alberta, I helped them through a series of meetings, but they really have done amazing work, and I'm super grateful to them because they issued an amazing report, and they actually dedicated 2 whole pages to the policy and basically said how they see this as really being a game changer for all community land trusts, which is amazing. That was a CMHC funded study. The Hill has done articles on this. Like, this is where I'm at. Like, it's really, we're gearing up for this election. We've got another window. Like, we need to make this happen now is really like my angle. Like, now is our window. If we miss this window, it's going to be another probably 4 years or something before something like this happens. And so, you know, I need your help really. And so if you have connections or if you think this is a good policy, spread the word, look at it, look into it, think about the repercussions for your own community land trust. I think they would be unbelievable, like the implications in a very positive way. I think this policy also solves problems right now that people are bumping into and they don't know how to navigate, which is around stuff like why we have leases everywhere happening with all of your community land trusts. This is a way to not go the lease angle and to actually free up non-government land for community land trusts. We have a templated letter of support. It'd be awesome. Or talk to your local MP. Spread the word as much as possible. So like, in summary, you know, we're continuing to face this affordable housing crisis. And honestly, what the government's been doing, and their plan is to just keep doing the same thing, it's not been working. Like, why are we continuing to do this? And this isn't the end-all be-all answer, but I'm telling you, we're gonna need a suite. We need a like spectrum of solutions. And this is unlike anything else we've got out there. It'll be another tool in our toolkit, and we gotta start adding this diversity of tools so we can start to actually address this in a scalable way. And yeah, community land trusts already exist in Canada. Let's supercharge them. Let's catch up with the rest of the world is what we really need to do. And we're taking something that is actually very low risk because we're using an existing mechanism in Canada and we're modifying it very slightly. So the risk is low to the government and low to taxpayers. And with this, we can have a hugely scaled response right across Canada. Overnight, there could be projects happening. I know of like some, up in Kitimat, there's some LNG companies that can't find any housing for their workforce. I had a conversation with, I think it was Petronas, and they were like, we would donate like a huge chunk of land for affordable housing like that if you had your policy. Like stuff like that. Like it takes a partnership between like private wealth and the need, the public need, but private side of stuff sees the need. Like they see, like people need homes to live. They need like, it feeds into the workforce sort of side of stuff. It feeds into like solving like our problems that we're facing in Canada, really. And so that's effectively it. That's the policy and that's the end of it in the presentation. I didn't even look at the time at all, so I have no idea how.
You're doing amazing. We got 17 minutes.
Perfect. I love it. So, and I love, I love questions. So I'm glad we got some time for questions at the end. And so we got a few, I think in the back here first, and then we'll go up front.
Would this benefit, this policy, I'm new to this, so bear with me, but would this benefit, we're trying to buy like a $4.5 million property right now. If this policy was in place, would that private landlord who wants to sell to us benefit by being able to bring down the price? Because they wouldn't have to pay capital gains? Like, could we?
Yeah, so there could be a couple different ways that it could work, and you could work out a deal like that. In all honesty, it depends on what their position ultimately is, but you might be able to really, they might be actually interested in the idea of doing a donation, like a fairly large donation this way, and maybe some recapture deal, but the you could structure it a bunch of different ways, and the policy certainly would not hurt the transaction, I can tell you that. But I think you'd probably, I could see them approaching it in multiple different ways. I think a straight out just sale of the property, honestly, is probably not the best option for you. If this came into play, I think you would have a high likelihood or opportunity to actually just get land donated to you, which is way better for you and your land trust in the long run. And if you've got the means.
We're trying to get at-risk properties out of the market.
Sure.
Some particular sites.
Yeah.
Have a lot of low-income residents on them.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm wondering if this was in place, would that be something that benefit?
So here's another really quick story before I get on to the next question, is that here's another really practical story. So in Halifax, I think it was, there was a fellow, and kind of like one of these land barons, and he owns a whole bunch of stuff. He had 2 giant apartment high-rises, and they're filled with seniors. He is getting up there in age. He doesn't want to run the company forever. He's kind of getting out of it. He was kind of trapped because he didn't want to just sell these properties or give them away because he's worried all of the seniors are going to get rent evicted. So he was trying to work out a deal with the land trust. And so he's thinking about selling it to the land trust, like he's going to take a huge hit, sell it to the land trust like way below market value so the land trust could afford it. But the problem with that is it actually creates like potentially a big tax liability for the land trust, because if you get it way below market value, the book value is way, way down, market value is way, way up. I mean, in theory, land trust should never dispose of assets ever. But it's actually like not great that way, and it's not great for him because he's just taking a huge hit on that. So they're kind of struggling to make a deal. They couldn't make a deal. They couldn't make a deal. And this is kind of it. It was kind of in a way at-risk properties because they were going to possibly just go up in smoke and be lost forever. Not exactly the same. But anyways, he literally again was just like, both the land trust and him were like, if we had this, like he was like, I would do it like right now. I would donate the properties, and then we could save them. We could make sure we could provide affordability to the seniors in the future. I know it's going to go into good hands. It doesn't create this big liability for the land trust. It's a way better deal for the land trust. It's a better deal for him. So that would be an example of it kind of like coming into play. But I don't want to spend too much time because I saw a few other questions. I think we had one up at the front and then maybe one here and then one in the back.
Yeah, thanks for this. I think it's super interesting. I'm pretty, no worries. I think this is super interesting. I'm pretty sold. I can't help but wonder if it's not going far enough. Similar to the question I asked previously, should there not also be considerations of tax exemption if one was to sell their property to a CLT? But also, I'm trying to think of just more instances in which a company, a Petronas, for instance, would not just want to sell the land versus donate it. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
There's a skepticism I have. I could see some one-off situations of folks wanting to donate, a community member saying, "Hey, I want to keep it in the community," but I'm wondering if this is a powerful enough of an incentive for large companies and corporations to actually want to give up land versus if you were to find a way to sweeten up the pie a little bit more.
Yeah, I like it. Interesting angle. So one thing, it's always kind of a struggle, right? Like we're trying to get buy-in from the government to do this, and they get really testy, especially when you're talking about cracking open the Income Tax Act. So what happens is, it's, in my mind, I see it as like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So I think a bit of it is, baby steps, and also hitting that middle ground. Like if we incentivize it too much, we push it too much, I think government will freak out and worry about like losing tax revenue and other stuff along those lines. Is this powerful enough? That's why I really like that data around the ecological gift program, where because I was thinking is this actually a mechanism people use? Is this enough? Exactly your question. And again, over 9 years in our country, having $1 billion worth of land donated is pretty epic. It's definitely incentivizing people to do donations. So I think it will get projects to happen. And in your other point about why wouldn't they just sell it? You're right, they will just sell it. If they're really profit driven and that's it, that's the only thing, they will sell it right away. It's these weird, there's a couple different things happening. Part of it is you get corporations that want to do public good, but sometimes they can't just justify a massive donation. So this makes it a little palatable for them. You got some people and organizations and individuals who have accumulated a lot of land and they're kind of at the end of that trajectory and they're looking at offloading things in a tax effective way this will be perfect for them right there as well. And then I think, yeah, you do have these weird properties that are kicking around, and usually there's a surprising number of them, but usually they have been on the books for a really, really long time. So like 75% of their value is capital gains. Like that example of like, you know, buying property in like I think Canfor, actually, I talked to them. They had a chunk of land in like Vancouver here actually, and I think it's like under one of the bridges. And it's like you could fit like a couple sea cans on it, but they've had that since like, I can't remember, it was like 1904. Because, you know, they're just like an ancient company. Maybe it wasn't that early, but they bought it for nothing, right? Like pennies. And now it's worth millions and millions of dollars. So the reason they're not just selling that is because it really goes back to accounting and reporting and financials. It would seriously damage the balance sheet to like do that. So that's why they don't. It's easier just to hold on to it. You get that with a lot of properties that need remediation as well. It's really bad, but it's actually cheaper for companies just to like keep them forever and pay the property tax than to actually remediate them. It's kind of bad that way. You get that with old tank farms and gas stations, and then it locks up this land and you can never have development on it, and it's holding back your community. So the other thing I'll say as well is that this can be an amazing tool to actually drive redevelopment and reinvestment in areas. So if you look at Point Grey, like I was talking about this earlier, I met the fellow who set up Point Grey. So it's a lease mechanism. He built it off the Hong Kong model. He's actually from Hong Kong. And he set up, I don't know if you guys knew this, but it's this perpetual kind of lease that renews. He did that because Hong Kong's really tight for real estate and they want to constantly like re-incentivize redevelopment. That's what he did on Point Grey. And if you look at it, it is working beautifully, and actually it is very similar to a land trust model if you actually look at the fundamentals of it. So there's huge opportunity for driving redevelopment of like underutilized land in communities. Like how many of us have like all these for lease signs that have been sitting around forever? Can you imagine like using that stuff for good to like be amazing? Anyways, I think we had a question here, then a question in the back, and then a question up front.
The first time I heard you speak, first time I heard you speak, that Christmas took my Liberal MP out for drinks.
Wicked.
3 old fashions.
Oh, perfect. Should have been 4. No.
The team. What are you hearing from Sean Fraser about this?
Oh, yeah.
Because what I understand is he likes to think out of the box.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get pushed around at cabinet tables. So what are you hearing?
Do you know, I haven't, and like, I don't have a good connection now so much to Sean Fraser. Like, if you have that, like, that's the sort of stuff where it's really painful because, like, the people who are seeing it are, like, high up in government and are like, this is awesome, but they're not the decision makers I need at the time, right? So it's literally, like, it's felt like with this policy, like, when people actually, sometimes at the face, they're like, there's got to be a catch, right? So they don't even look into it. Then the people that do actually take the time to look into it love it and think it's awesome, but I haven't been able to get like the key decision maker people to do that. And again, like I said, all the directions I've been hearing is it's really Chrystia Freeland and her department is who I need. And so, but everybody else along the way that we can get in, and like sometimes those people, right, like they talk to each other. So like, and again, when it was Minister Hussein, I met with him and he really liked it, and I was like, get this in front of Chrystia, like do this stuff, right? And but he's no longer there, and so like, yeah, it's just literally getting that to happen. And during election mode, like they're looking at wins. It's just like, here's a slam dunk for you guys. Like put this in your, you'll look great. Do it.
That's another 3 old fashions.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I like it. So I think we got, or should we go up front first? Yeah, okay. Let's go up front and then we'll go to the back.
Okay. Hi. So when I first heard this, I loved it. I thought this was great. When in our CLT, we talked to a lawyer about dissolution. And what he said was that CLTs are just nonprofits. And there's no protection in law. And it's all in the bylaws. And so we put in a set of bylaws now about, perpetuity.
That's awesome.
And then the next board that comes in, different membership, different interests.
Yep.
They blow it up and they change it back to, oh, now the members are going to sell and have a windfall.
Sure. Yep.
And so what I thought about this is, oh, that's why the government hasn't passed it, because we
They're
do
worried
this
about that.
tax incentive, people donate to the CLTs, and then those people change it to
Totally.
whatever.
Totally.
So that's what went through my mind, and it's good to hear that you've talked to the
Totally.
lawyers. But can you fill me in
Yeah.
on how that works?
Yeah, I've got the full kind of policy up here, and you can look at it. So in the Income Tax Act, and there is already provisions and mechanisms through the Ecological Gift Program for exactly the same purpose. So there is basically a recapture tax. So like if something like this happens, so you get the tax, you can't use it in a nefarious way that way. You can't, have a developer that sets up this CLT somehow that they're linked to, donate land to themselves, and like get it, tax-free, which by the way would make no sense at all because they'd still actually be negative through the transaction no matter what. But anyways, and then the worry is that in the future, then they just dissolve that or they sell it back to themselves for $1 or something like that. They would lose money in basically every step of the way to do that. First of all, it's one thing I'd say, they're better off just holding on to the land because they don't pay capital gains if they just hold on to it. It's only if they sell it. But the other thing is that with the Ecological Gift Program, they've actually built in really good legislation in there that has this recapture. So if somebody tries to do that with the Ecological Gift Program right now, with an ecological land trust, what would happen is as soon as that property is disposed of, there's tax owing exactly the equivalent of what would have been paid on the way in, so people can't get out of the tax. They can't use it as a way to like just make tax go away. So that is the mechanism, but you're right. And so it's in the Income Tax Act. It's not in like the Societies Act, which I think is probably what your lawyer was saying. And your lawyer would be correct. It's not in the Societies Act.
So that would actually even strengthen the dissolution case.
Well, yeah, that's just it. That's exactly it. And honestly, community land trusts, even in some of their structure, you're right at the fundamentals, like the power of a community land trust is to hold land forever, right? So you really got to make sure when you're setting stuff up that it's really clear objectives when you talk about bylaws and you talk about everything that is set in there, because if there's risk, if there really is an opportunity for risk for just some new board comes in and they decide to blow everything up and throw it all out the window, it really all of the value is gone instantaneously from doing anything like this. So it's really it has to be one of the fundamental core principles and values of a community land trust in the beginning. And it's awesome to hear people say that at this conference over and over again, but that is the power. The power of community land trust is to acquire land and never let it go and manage it forever. That is the magic. And then what you do on that land could be a whole bunch of different things. Could be a co-op, could be an equity share model, could be a condo, could be individual homes, could be little developments, you name it, right? So, but the magic is holding the land forever for the community. 5 minutes. We got one more question. Do we have a question in the back? No, we're good. Yeah, sure.
Might have been one in the chat.
Oh, was there one in the chat? I keep touching this, by the way. I'm sorry, I'll hold it. It's probably driving you guys crazy. Where is the chat? There we go. I can read it. With growing pressure on provincial and federal governments to fund affordable housing projects, have they been made aware of the leveraging potential of private land donations to CLTs via capital cost matching programs? Yeah, interesting. You know what? It's shocking to me, but what I've been hearing is all of the government's push has always been on speed up the process for builders, incentivize building more homes, or we're going to give land, but we're going to give it as a lease. This sort of stuff that I'm talking about here is where I think it comes at it from a completely different angle. I don't know about you guys in the room, but I haven't heard the government talking at all about private land donations to tackle this stuff. So this is where it's really, and that is why this is totally different, but in a very good way. We got to come at this problem from a bunch of different angles. And again, I just love the idea of mobilizing private wealth for public good. How much private wealth is out there where people are sitting on assets and land for however long, and we need it, the communities need it. And so this is a lever for them to do that. And I know there's many of them that will if they had a mechanism like this. Any other questions? No? Yeah, okay, up front and then in the back. Let's do that.
Actually, a statement more so that I was thinking it could actually make sense for the network to form potentially a working group of interested members and other, associate members who are interested in actually mobilizing this and moving it forward.
That would be amazing.
Because I do think you're right. We have a lot of connections within the movement to different, senators and ministers, and to actually be able to coordinate that in a more active way could be really powerful.
That would be incredible. And, the other thing I'll throw out there is that, up until recently, I wasn't a community land trust. So I think a lot of the times when I'd be pitching this, they'd be like, well, what do the community land trusts think of this? So to have you guys, because you're the boots in the ground, be like, this would be a game changer for us, this would be amazing, would really add a lot of clout to this, honestly. And so that's the sort of stuff, it would be incredible, actually, to have something like that. I'd be all over it, honestly.
Get in touch with me, Celia at communityland.ca, and we can talk more about it, because
I love it.
we also want to make sure that the way that a community land trust is defined in the policy is in line with how our movement is thinking
Yes.
about what is a community land trust and what isn't.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I do like that. And then I think we had a question in the back. I think we probably can cram one more in. Can we do it? Standing between you guys and drinks. Ooh, it's dangerous.
Thanks for the plug, Colin. I'm Caitlin from the Aboriginal Standing Committee.
That's right. Oh, yeah. I thought I recognized you.
I just wanted to ask about, do you have connections in Senate right now that you're talking to?
So there's been a couple connections, and but I could always use more. What I kind of feel like is more is better, because it's really going to take a lot of people pushing before something kind of lands. So if you've got connections, and also, you know what is it's kind of shocking, but for all the organizations I've connected with and made really great inroads with, I really haven't made great inroads with CMHC, and it's just been a lack of a connection. And I know so many of you work with them that that would be something that's probably as easy for you guys to do, that I think would be super powerful, because I know they feed into the government, and I know they're interested in land trusts. They're in the room. Okay. Well, we got to talk later. Buy you 4 old fashions.
And then the other thing is leveraging maybe some of the existing entities like the National Indigenous Homelessness Council. Would definitely have contact with Sean Fraser.
That would be
because,
amazing.
and probably Tim Richter as well with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness.
So we got to talk after this. That would be incredible. And you know what? Most of my day job is working with a lot of different nations, and housing on reserve is a huge problem for, at least in BC. And so I actually see, we're kind of exploring, and I know I can see there's some at the conference here, but we're exploring with the Kamloops Community Land Trust, even doing Aboriginal housing. How do we do it in a respectful, good way? And so there's huge opportunities, and I would love that. All right, I think that's it. Thanks for listening to me. You stayed awake, all of you. Thank you.